You think you're their father?
The quote, "the student has become the master," isn't something which can be used casually. You really have to earn it. So today, we're taking a look at some of the most legendary student versus mentor fights in the movies to see how many of them are worthy. As much as I despise the new trilogy of Star Wars films, I will say that Luke finessing Kylo Ren here was one of the better moments for sure. Bro was trolling Kylo while also telling him he loves him. The fight, if it can even be called a fight, was probably the most entertaining moment in the whole movie, and full credit goes to Luke for managing to keep Kylo engaged for as long as he did without even being physically present. And yes, he definitely did train the kid back in the good old Star Wars days that Disney chose not to show us. So this one's a special kind of entry because not only did Death Dealer take Shang-Chi in as an apprentice, but the actor who plays him, Andy Lee, also happened to train Simu Liu, who, you guessed it, plays Shang-Chi. Keeping all of that aside, this is an exceptional battle as there's no unnecessary humour or interruption between them. It's just raw action and some seriously impressive moves that make you forget this is an MCU film. I wish we got more scenes like this in movies that don't have people with superpowers. Kudos to whoever coordinated the musical sequence with the choreography because it was really beautiful.
You think you're their father?
Okay, so you may not agree with this logic, but I'm going to go ahead with it because it's my video after all. So Splinter may not have trained Shredder himself, but they do have an association via a common master. So you could say that Splinter was repping here. You can disagree for sure, but it is what it is, and I'm gonna leave it at that. So yeah, it was a great fight which definitely justifies the length of this sequence. I do feel like Splinter should have put up a better fight than he did, but hey, I can't complain when we have a literal rat up against what can only be described as an agent of death. Also, the fact that Shredder took so long to beat Splinter despite having every advantage possible is concerning. Actually, this whole scene shows how skilled Splinter really is.
Our planet will survive! No!
Just because you're a mentor doesn't automatically make you a good guy, as we can see here in the match between Optimus Prime and Sentinel Prime. The once highly regarded Sentinel was a huge role model for Optimus, but all of that went to the dogs after his somewhat predictable reveal as the main villain of the movie.
You forget your place.
The epic clash between the two primes was a sight to behold, although Sentinel does gain the upper hand much to our displeasure. Thank God for Megatron's ego, right?
This is my planet.
While I do believe that Optimus shouldn't have had to rely on extra support to get the job done, he does gain some redemption by not only finishing off Megatron, but also ending Sentinel with an epic line that's pretty much the Transformers version of "Congratulations, you played yourself."
You betrayed yourself. No, Optimus!
Okay, before we go ahead, I just want to talk about this epic website called, which, as its name suggests, is an online shopping site for movie collectibles that will make your jaws drop. It's got everything you need.
Maximum effort.
Whether it's Marvel or DC, and I honestly couldn't stop myself from buying their products. Just imagine decorating your desk with the awesome duo of Deadpool and Wolverine. Yeah, their action figures are available on the site, and they look amazing. Or hey, if DC is your cup of coffee, then check out their 1:9 scale Batman action figure modeled after the Shadow himself, Robert Pattinson. Yeah, having this in your collection will surely turn on the edge. Jokes aside, there's a wide range of collectibles available on the Cinema Treasures, right from Iron Man to Wonder Woman to you name it. And you want to know what the best part is? They've got an anime section too. So all you otakus can go crazy as well. Check out the link in my bio to visit the website and use the code TVRegent10 for 10% off their products. I don't know if we can call Tony Stark Ultron's mentor, but he is for sure his creator, which means whatever Ultron did know when he gained sentience was because of Tony putting in the long nights with Bruce Banner. Now, the fight between these two can't be called a proper versus because Ultron is present in multiple entities at the same time. However, this was his strongest version at the time, so it does count for something. There isn't a lot to go on either, because most of this scene focuses on the other Avengers, but I personally thought it was super badass for Iron Man to be a standard Ultron so easily. Yeah, I know the Vibranium version is supposed to be the main villain, but as per technicalities, this one still counts. I love how sarcastic and egocentric Ultron actually is, resembling Tony's earlier personality, which almost makes us believe that he's truly the child of Iron Man. Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, eh?
I'm already there. You'll catch on. But first, you might need to catch Dr. Banner.
When you have a difficult student to work with, the best way forward is to try and motivate him with the habits he values. That's exactly what Master Shifu does here when he tries to make Po an efficient fighter. Normal methods were never going to work on him, so the best alternative was to provide him with dumplings as a reward. You know, watching Po awaken all kinds of hidden energy inside him just for the sake of dumplings makes me wonder if I should expand my palate for Asian cuisine. Bro turned into a completely different person as he went move for move with Shifu during their intense sessions. There are some fights in between as well, but to be fair, neither of them was fighting to beat the other. The focus was always on the dumplings. I can only imagine that the sales for these products must have gone crazy after Kung Fu Panda first hit the big screen. Yeah, this is basically the medieval version of Obi-Wan Kenobi versus Anakin Skywalker. Bowen must have regretted training Anon earlier on in his life, only to come to this final battle as a result of it. Now, we all know why Anon needs to go, but what's more important to understand is that it only gets done after Draco sacrifices himself. It's a touching moment which brings a lot of emotions to the surface, but hey, the action is pretty cool too. The scene shuffles occasionally between Bowen taking on Anon and the other battles going on at the same time, but I feel it did justice to the grand climax of this film. The MVP is definitely Draco, who's also animated quite well considering this is from 1996, but I do need to shout out the impressive encounter between the sword wielders as they form the crux of the sequence. Imagine if Drogon had this kind of sacrificial nature in him. It would have changed the entire ending of Game of Thrones.
Fight back, Dragon Slayer! Defend yourself!
Never again.
Eric, release them!
For all the rivalries that exist between these two, we can't ignore the fact that it was Charles Xavier who helped Magneto attain true control over his powers. If not for his guidance earlier in the film, Eric wouldn't have been able to lift the submarine like he did in the final arc of the film. Sadly, their camaraderie would quickly turn to a physical fight as Magneto tried to use the missiles fired at him like an Uno reverse play. Professor X is a smart guy, but I think he could have probably said a much better line than, "They were just following orders," to a survivor of the Holocaust. Even so, it was nice to see that Magneto hadn't lost his sense of humanity, particularly when he forgot everything to go and help his friend who got shot because of his negligence. This is indeed a deeply moving scene that appeals to sensibilities well beyond those of hatred and competition. And yes, it's also the defining moment that shaped the core relationship in the X-Men franchise.
I've become more powerful than any Jedi. Even you.
Okay, so let me just clarify why I've chosen this scene for this particular video, because even I didn't remember this part while watching the movie. According to Star Wars lore, Yoda was the Jedi Master who mentored Count Dooku, training him as his Padawan before Dooku eventually left the Jedi Order and fell to the dark side, becoming the Sith Lord known as Darth Tyrannus. So yeah, this means you can enjoy this brilliant duel today between two extremely skilled fighters. Even though the lightsaber fight was coordinated well, hearing Yoda taunt Dooku about his lackluster skills only made it even more enjoyable to watch.
Fought well you have, my old Padawan.
Seeing Yoda pull out that lightsaber though was the key highlight of the whole film, because I remember clearly how everyone erupted in loud applause when they saw this for the first time. Those were the good times, weren't they? Also, I wonder how much fun Christopher Lee had while swinging at nothing during this shoot. Well, technically his stunt double, but you know what I mean.
Powered reduced to 19%.
Tony Stark is a genius, billionaire, playboy, philanthropist, but at one point he was just a young man who'd lost his parents. In order to achieve what he did, he needed someone to guide him along the paths of business, and that person happened to be Obadiah Stane. Unfortunately, he also happened to be the main villain of the OG Iron Man movie, which led to the final battle being epic AF. Iron Man was always at a disadvantage because his suit wasn't at full capacity, and he was dealing with a much larger opponent. However, the student surpasses his master in more ways than one when he tricks him with the altitude cooling issues and then straight up gets him electrocuted with some assistance from Pepper. I would have personally loved to see a battle between the Ironmonger and the Nanosuit. We all know who would have won that, but full credit to Tony for being able to come out on top even with such a massive nerf. At first, even I was shocked when I learnt about Voldemort being a former student at Hogwarts named Tom Riddle. I'm from the Harry Potter movie fanbase, so book lovers, please spare me. Anyway, even though Dumbledore may not have been a personal mentor to Tom, he was still his teacher, and that makes him applicable for this entry. The fight isn't between him and Tom though, but Voldemort. That's what makes this epic duel worthy of an entry, as it not only gives us an idea of their power rankings, but also treats us to some sick visuals in the process. The dragon snake flame thingy that Voldemort casually spits out was a masterclass in CGI, which once again begs the question as to why modern VFX artists aren't able to give us this kind of quality. I think what also sets this apart is the lack of dialogue. You can sense that both these opponents don't want to underestimate each other, which is why they're doing their best to claim victory as quickly as possible. Man, we really should have had more fight scenes like this in Harry Potter. I'd take them over MCU Phase 4 any day of the week.
Better shot.
Trust me, I still am.
Yeah, we all know how much Raven loved Eric in the X-Men franchise, but just like how she turns on him in the OG trilogy, history kinda repeats itself here with the rebooted timeline. If you're wondering why Mystique is Magneto's student, we need to remember how he was the one who helped her embrace her true mutant form. Ever since the finale of First Class, she's been by his side the whole time, so it does count as a mentorship. The final kick was definitely a flex more than anything else, because she could have knocked him out with a simple attack too. However, I suppose that's what happens when you piss off a girl who has a crush on you. Anyway, the conclusion of Days of Future Past was heavily reliant on Mystique getting one over Magneto, and she manages to pull it off with great swag. Although, I'll admit that shooting him in the neck all of a sudden was definitely going to give her a massive advantage. Not that it should matter, because the whole X-Men timeline was at stake, and Raven made sure to preserve it so that the audience could have a hopeful future with the franchise. Yeah, it's sad the people at Fox didn't feel the same way. Vampires aren't supposed to be role models for anyone, but this is Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt we're talking about here, so I'm sure there's already a whole bunch of fans ready to join their cult. As far as the relationship between Louis and Lestat goes, it's that of an ambitious mentor who tries his best to lead his disciple down the wrong path. All of that changes when Claudia comes into the picture, which eventually leads the student to betray his mentor. The only problem with that is, well, vampires are immortal, so that's what leads to the brief yet effective confrontation between Louis and Lestat. It's not exactly an action masterpiece,
Claudia.
but their fight does showcase how far apart they've grown in terms of ideologies. Burning your own teacher with a candle has got to be one of the roughest things a person can do, regardless of whether they're humans or vampires. That shot of Lestat burning while running along the ceiling is so creepy and unsettling. Yeah, I find it awesome. Bro was being a vampire with so much passion, he genuinely spooked the other vampires. Plus, the way Tom Cruise looked at his age, I wouldn't be surprised if he too had some vampire genes in him.
And I delivered you into the hands of death for the second time.
Denzel Washington is a certified legend on the TV region, so it's no surprise that he finds his way into my top 10. What does pay me though, is that he's the bad guy in 2001's Training Day. Yeah, he's supposed to be Jake's mentor, but all he does is exploit his position to try and keep his new junior in check. That's pretty much why Jake ended up fighting his mentor in the first place. Ethan Hawke never really got the praise he should have for this role, so here I am giving him his flowers. The fight was more of a chase as Alonzo and Jake found themselves in a game of cat and mouse, occasionally trading blows up until the car sequence. From a moral perspective, we're supposed to be rooting for Jake, but I did feel bad seeing Denzel Washington being presented as such a villain. He does do a good job of it though, especially with the infamous King Kong line. You know something? By the end of the movie, Jake almost took Alonzo's place in a way. He gained the respect of two major gangs by the end.
There it is, Jake.
The Serenos and the Bloods. Unlike Alonzo though, Jake gained it through the quality of his actions. They feared Alonzo, but they'll respect Jake, so you could say that the student has indeed surpassed his master in this case.
If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Remember the quote that I started this video with? Well, in the very first Star Wars film, Darth Vader says his own rendition of it while taunting Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Now I am the master.
Only a master of evil, Darth.
It's our first proper introduction to the relationship between these two characters, and I must say, that fight that followed was super impressive for something that was released way back in 1977. Now, look, I will admit that Obi-Wan wasn't exactly the fastest here, but at the same time, he was pretty old. The very fact that he's able to move as well as he does here is an achievement in itself. I read somewhere that the in-canon reason why this fight was so slow is because of Obi-Wan's fighting style, which is extremely defensive by nature. At the same time, Darth Vader was being excessively cautious and timid with his offense, which is completely understandable, because, well, who wouldn't be excessively cautious fighting the same guy who amputated 3 of your limbs and left you roasting alive the last time you saw him? It does end tragically, with Obi-Wan losing his life, although I'm not sure that was the most satisfying way for Vader to get his revenge on his mentor. I guess we can't really complain about such things when the newer outputs from Star Wars have been nothing short of disappointing.
Come on, stop trying to hit me and hit me.
This one's a bit unusual because the fight is happening at the same time Morpheus becomes Neo's mentor. Well, I guess it still applies by virtue of technicality, so I won't argue much there. It's not only a great fight, but it also helps the audience learn more about the way the Matrix functions. I truly admire the way these guys managed to smoothly include the workings of the Matrix in real-time fighting. Remember how Neo's heavy breathing stops the moment Morpheus reminds him there's literally no air to breathe? Yeah, that one caught the audience off guard as well. Once Neo's brain accepts that, his fatigue vanishes almost instantly and the placebo effect becomes ineffective. Now, I know everyone's rooting for Keanu Reeves in this fight, as they rightfully should, but spare a thought for Morpheus as well. Lawrence Fishburne delivers an absolute performance in this scene, particularly with the subtleties in his expressions. There's a lot of great stuff going on, like the cinematography, the action choreography and whatnot, but if we're to look at this scene different from a modern viewpoint, then I'd say it was almost as if Morpheus was guiding Neo through a new game. After all, bro's been playing it much longer than his student.
I know what you're trying to do.
I'm trying to free your mind, Neo. But I can only show you the door. You're the one that has to walk through it.
Kaecilius really doesn't know how to repay favors, does he? The Ancient One took him in and trained him for decades so that he could become a master of the mystic arts, but bro preferred having an edgy persona, so here we are. The battle in the mirror dimension starts off with Doctor Strange being the main subject, but that quickly shifts after the Ancient One shows up to save him and Mordo. Now, let me just say this scene would have cracked the top 10 by visuals alone because I was tripping the entire time. There's an earlier battle between the Ancient One, Kaecilius, and his followers, which was also pretty graphic, but I've chosen this one because it actually has a victor, albeit by cheating. That's right, even though Kaecilius had a strong connection to the dark dimension, she remained unfazed and took on multiple fighters in an extremely badass display. Unfortunately, not everyone can predict a disgruntled man slicing through his own to be able to get rid of his main obstacle. It's brutal and ruthless. That's exactly what a villain is supposed to be, and Mads Mikkelsen does complete justice to this role. Thank God he wasn't playing Hannibal Lecter here, otherwise he would have taken the Ancient One's body with him for dinner. Wenwu isn't the ideal dad to have while growing up, especially if you lose your mom early on. Unfortunately, those were the cards that were dealt to Shang-Chi, but luckily, bro managed to turn those metaphorical cards into rings that would help him overcome the man who has made his childhood a living hell. That's why this final battle between them is so important for Shang-Chi's character development. Yes, it has a lot of slick moves and an amazing reversal when he gains control of the 10 rings. That's not the main point of this battle. It's more about the strained relationship he's had with his dad, who also happened to be his sole mentor after his mom passed away. The way he fights his father by using his mother's technique really brought a tear to my eye. And no, I'm not just saying that to be dramatic, okay? Wenwu himself wasn't expecting his son to be as gifted as he was, and towards the end, both father and son made peace with their differences. Of course, it was kind of tragic that Wenwu had to sacrifice himself for the plot to happen, but I guess that's all you can do when dealing with overpowered CGI dragons.
I won't kill you. But I don't have to save you.
Imagine training someone for 7 years just to see them dressed up as a bat. Yeah, that alone must have sent Ra's al Ghul into a frenzy, but at the end of the day, he gets beaten by Bruce Wayne and is left to die at the hands of accidental causes.
Don't you have anything new? How about this?
So I guess he can be a little proud of his achievement. There are some great moments in the final battle, especially the parts where you can see genuine fear in Ra's al Ghul. Bro was definitely wondering whether he was training Bruce Wayne or Patrick Bateman back in the day. Anyway, Batman puts in a solid performance to prove his mettle, and also the fact that he's put his past days behind him to become the symbol of hope for Gotham. The shot where he breaks Liam Neeson's sword was also pretty cool, as it showcases how far along Bruce has come in terms of strength and power. Oh, and how can I forget the part where Batman tells Ra's al Ghul the same line he would always tell him about minding his surroundings. I love how Batman communicates this like a son upset at his father. Bruce looked at Ra's as a true mentor and even perhaps a father figure, but eventually Ra's let him down.
You were just an ordinary man in a cape. That's why you couldn't fight injustice, and that's why you can't stop this train. Consider anything about stopping it. It was never my decision to...
Shifu may have had aura in an earlier entry, but there's no such leeway for him here, I'm afraid. There's nothing that stings harder than a jealous student who never got the validation he so desperately needed from his master.
Who drove me to train until my bones cracked? Who denied me my destiny?
It's kind of the reason why Tai Lung was so brutal in his battle against Master Shifu. Now look.
It is now
If we're looking at the real-life animals these characters are based on, then there's no way a red panda is going to beat a snow leopard. But in the film, Tai Lung was trained and mentored by Shifu, so his resounding victory does make an impact. To be fair to Shifu, it didn't look like he really wanted to fight his once-forgotten disciple, and he only started to attack a bit after his staff got broken.
Tell me! Tell me!
Even so, that wasn't enough for him to beat Tai Lung, who really looked demonic in the way he was attacking his ex-master. The fight animation was great, and we're properly introduced to Tai Lung's vast variety of attacks, even though he's been shown in action throughout the movie. We're lucky this is a kids' film, because if it was R-rated, then I'm sure they would have shown Tai Lung offing Shifu in the most brutal manner possible. Luckily for everyone, Po shows up gasping for dear life and saves Shifu from certain doom.
Give me the scroll. I would rather die.
I loved you, man. You know that?
Man, if you've been trained by the Italian stallion Rocky Balboa, the least you can do is show him the kind of appreciation and gratitude that he deserves. However, Tommy Gunn wasn't that kind of dude, and he ended up challenging his mentor in an unofficial street fight. The battle was definitely not an honorable one, but I guess that's what happens when you don't have the right manager. Tommy was tired of living in Rocky's shadow, but even then, he got knocked down quite easily in the first round. Normally, that would have been the end of it, but this was a dirty fight, plus the movie's got to get a bit dramatic for its final battle. The sneak attacks and blows to the head definitely had us all worrying for Rocky because he's still got the injuries from his fight with Ivan Drago from the previous film. Of course, none of that matters when you're dealing with a prime Giga Chad, and Rocky gives us all a brutal display of his street fighting skills from back in the day. That's right. Our man used to work for a mobster before his boxing days, and it finally pays off here when he completely and mercilessly knocks Tommy to the ground. You know, a lot of people may not have loved Rocky V, but to me, this was actually one of the better entries in the franchise. A sensible transition to being forced to retire due to head trauma was a nice change of pace. I also liked how Rocky only challenged Tommy after witnessing Paulie getting knocked out. That's the kind of loyalty Tommy should have shown his mentor.
Come on, come on!
This one is actually more of a beleaguered woman getting revenge over her evil ex-lover, but he was a mentor to her too, so it qualifies to be on my list. The true mentor of the bride was actually Pei Mei, and he ends up being the MVP here as he helped Uma Thurman figure out the 5-point palm exploding heart technique. The battle against Bill was a rather interesting one, with both fighters being seated throughout their brief sizzle. I'm not sure how it would have turned out if Bill and the bride were actually standing and going full power, but hey, Quentin Tarantino's stylistic choices aren't to be argued with. Plus, I think a seated battle is a pretty cool concept. Man, that look on Uma's face right before she dealt the final blow definitely looked like she let out all of her rage and frustration with this battle. Just look at how she behaves after dealing the killer blow to Bill. She's actually warm and friendly towards him, although that shouldn't be a reason for us to side with Bill and make him out to be this misunderstood lover boy. That man did a horrible thing, and he surely had it coming. I also loved how the whole Pei Mei tutelage arc comes full circle, with her using the technique even Bill was never entrusted with. It shows that the bride, aka Beatrix Kiddo, was the only student he ever fully respected. I suppose she never told Bill she knew the technique out of a subconscious fear of one day having to use it against him. After all, if he knew Beatrix could pull off the technique, he would have been ready to defend against it. So yeah, the element of surprise turned out to be the bride's true ace in the hole.
Baby, you ain't kidding.
I've already covered the first time we saw these two fighting each other, but that was from the first Star Wars film, which is ironically after the one I'm covering now. Anyway, to have that kind of prolonged relationship with your mentor definitely means some serious stuff has gone down between you, and in this case, the epic encounter between Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan serves as proof of it. The reason this entry is at number 1 is because there's no other duo that's been around for as long as these two. The gap between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope is roughly 28 years, which makes this duel hit so much harder to Star Wars fans, particularly those who weren't around in 1977. Now, don't get me wrong. This scene did have its fair share of haters at the time, but it's aged quite well 20 years since its release and definitely stands as a highlight in the Star Wars universe. It's over 9 minutes long, but doesn't feel like it, as both fighters use their powers to try and gain the upper hand while also switching battle areas. Watching this in the cinema halls was an amazing cinematic experience for me. I was blown away by the CGI, choreography, and the display of fighting skills between Obi-Wan and Anakin. Everyone was on the edge of their seats, waiting to find out how this once heroic boy would go on to become one of the most iconic villains in film history. When Anakin's legs got sliced off, the theater was dead quiet. We all had our own theories at the time.
I have failed you, Anakin. I have failed you.
But no one saw this coming. And once Anakin burned, the crowd gasped in horror because it all came full circle. You don't get that kind of reaction nowadays, now do you? Hope you liked the video. Please subscribe to the TV Regent, and here's another video that I know you'll enjoy.